You're listening to the Geek Watch Podcast, Episode 62, Giving Hellboy Hell.
This is the Geek Watch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to Episode 62 of the Geek Watch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Buenos dias, Brian.
Well, we got a little bit of catch-up to do. We're definitely going to be talking about The Walking Dead, the last two episodes of The Walking Dead, and we've got some movie news this week. So let's go ahead and start out with that. Captain Marvel. It broke $1 billion, finally.
Look at the surprise on my face.
Well, for everyone out there that was worried that it might not break that $1 billion mark, yes, it's now in the Billionaires Club. So, no surprise there. I mean, it was very well received, although, of course, there were people on the internet going, oh, this is going to be what destroys the Marvel movies, but not quite at all.
Well, everything that I heard, from people who had seen it, all the problems were just so little and nitpicky. The fact is that it was a great movie. It was
yeah,
good
absolutely.
story, great characters, and we loved them all. And if you didn't watch it because you had heard all these things or you were upset about it not being the original Marvel or whatever, and, you just missed a great movie.
Right. And, of course, we talked about it on one of the podcasts. And, of course, there were some people online that were giving it grief for different reasons. And this, of course, was before anybody had seen the film. And, of course, when we talked about it, there were some nitpicky things that I had about it. But, I mean, certainly nothing that ruined my enjoyment of the film. And it's still out there. So if you haven't seen it yet, folks, definitely go out and check it out. So definitely good news there. But, of course, not everything is good in Hollywood, so we're going to have to bring up the Hellboy issue. Hellboy is going to be coming out this week, so obviously I haven't seen it yet. There's a few movies I haven't caught up with, and we'll definitely talk about them when I do catch up with them. But, Hellboy right now is at 13% at Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow, yeah.
It was at 11. It's kicked up a couple, but there's been a lot of talk about this movie, and of course I was shocked because I thought this was, the pedigree that they had in this film, with the actors and of course the writers and everything else. Yeah, I expected a home run, but I read this article in the Wrap about that there were some issues behind the scenes which may have something to do with some of the issues that have come up in the film. Now, like I said, I haven't seen it yet, and I know, of course, you haven't seen it either. It's still, I think it's just now coming out in theaters when we're recording. But apparently, according to the Wrap, there was issues between the director, Neil Marshall, and two of the producers, Lawrence Gordon and Lloyd Levin. Now, all of them have a real serious pedigree. Because you look at like Marshall and Sam McCurdy, which is his cinematographer. Of course, they've had a long history working together. They're mostly known for, or at least to me, that they collaborated on Blackwater, which is one of the best reviewed Game of Thrones episodes. And so they're definitely strong in that area. And then when you look at Lawrence Gordon and Lloyd Levin, well, Gordon, of course, he owns the film rights to Hellboy, and Levin's worked on films like Boogie Nights, and he worked on the two previous Hellboy films, and Levin and Gordon are working together on Damon Lindelof's Watchmen adaptation for HBO.
Okay.
For HBO. So both sides, working together, you're talking, they're going to hit a home run. But apparently they weren't working together.
Yeah.
Now, nobody's really talking. In the Wrap article, there were people behind the scenes that were giving them this information, although they asked not to be named because they felt like if anybody knew they had been talking out of school, they could get in some serious...
Whistleblowers.
Yeah, they might get into some serious trouble. So nobody in this group is really saying a whole lot about what's going on, but some of the things that they were saying was, well, first of all, Sam McCurdy, the cinematographer, was fired. And the word was he was fired because this was basically a message to Neil Marshall to say, look, you may be the director, but we run the show. And that he was fired to make a statement. Whether that's true or not, of course, I don't know. But that's one of the things that they mentioned. There were 3 different people that went to the wrap and said that Levin interrupted Marshall frequently in front of the crew when Marshall was trying to rehearse actors, sometimes giving them different directions than the director was giving them. Now, Singer's attorney disputed that. In fact, quote, Mr. Levin would speak to Neil Marshall after rehearsals and discuss issues with him at that time. And then there was something else that was mentioned. 2 different insiders said that Harbour repeatedly walked off the set. That's David Harbour, who plays Hellboy. Said he was repeatedly walking off the set, refusing Marshall's request to do more takes, which I guess Singer was saying, Singer's is Harbour's agent and lawyer, and said, no, that never happened. In fact, Dave Harbour was like 110% all the time.
Yeah, I just can't imagine. Well, not that it couldn't happen, okay, but in Hellboy, in the makeup, I mean, to just walk off set, he wouldn't just be hurting the filming crew. He would be hurting the entire production crew. He'd be hurting the makeup artist. Right. But not only that, he would have to go back to the makeup trailer to get that removed properly.
Right.
It's not something you could do yourself.
Right. And the thing about it is, of course, once you take that stuff off, you know, it takes you hours to put it back on. Mm-hmm. So, I mean,
in a practical manner, this doesn't sound like a true story.
Well, yeah, I mean, Dave Harbour would have to be like the biggest jerk in the world to do that. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't sound, I mean, that doesn't sound right to me. He didn't sound like that. But again, this is a lot of he said, she said, you know, we don't know. Also, in the article, it said 2 insiders were saying that the script was being rewritten constantly. And, I mean, there's rewrites that happen in production. That's just something natural. But they're saying that Harbour was doing rewrites. Ian McShane was doing rewrites on the script.
Really?
Yeah, but at the same time, but their representatives say no, they weren't doing rewrites. Mm-hmm. So again, you're getting this he said.
That's not something I've ever heard about Ian McShane in any production he has ever done.
Right.
You know, it was a big thing, like when he guest starred on Game of Thrones, how he spoiled his character, and you know he didn't give a crap about that or anything. So, but as far as objecting to scripts or anything like that or making changes, I just can't see that. Now,
I'll tell you, the one thing I read in the article that seemed like the weirdest thing to get into a fight about, there was an issue with a tree. Mm-hmm. And this may be the tree that you see in the trailer. But apparently there was this big argument about what the tree should look like. Marshall wanted a realistic-looking, asymmetrical tree. But Levin overruled him, said he wanted a symmetrical tree. And so they filmed the symmetrical tree, but apparently they fought back and forth over it. That they filmed the symmetrical tree, and then some in post-production they made it asymmetrical again. It's like,
well, that kind of just sounds like a pissing contest at that point of time. Now, I do know, okay, for example, going back to Game of Thrones, George R. Martin has said, what we see as the Iron Throne is not what he envisions in his books, that it wasn't made by artisans or craftsmen, it was made by blacksmiths. It's asymmetrical, it's sharp, it's dangerous, it's not comfortable at all.
Right.
But he understood that for the production, they were going to be moving around and everything, that this was a much more practical throne to have. So he understood the difference. Now, I don't know what significance the tree has. It's not waiting for Godot, so I don't know what Hellboy's relation to the tree is going to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if this, again, I can't verify any of these stories, but if people are arguing about the tree, I mean, there's obviously, this is, in a sense, it's a metaphor for something else that's going on. I mean, obviously, you're not going to get into a pissing match about the tree. I mean, regardless of how important it is to the story, symmetrical, asymmetrical, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal to me. But again, if you're in the middle of a fight, that might be the hill you're emotional. That's kind of a hill you might think to dive on.
Now, I'm not going to lie, Brian. I have been a part of stage productions where a tree has been that big a deal in the production, where there was fights between the director and the set constructor, And it was quite a battle of wills, and we actors kind of sit on the side. We really can't do
Right.
anything about it. So I could see that.
Yeah. I guess that's certainly a possibility. But there was one other thing that I remember in the article, and that was Neil Marshall had his cut, his director's cut, and he turned it in. And apparently he didn't have right for final cut in the film. And so apparently the producers went in and they had their way with it.
It's going to make an interesting Blu-ray.
Yeah, that possibly. But it breaks my heart because right now all we really have are the reviews, but the reviews are almost always bad for Hellboy, the ones that I've read. Most of what I've read in the reviews are, Dave Harbour and Hellboy are great. It's the only great part of the movie.
Oh.
Apparently everything else is pretty bad. And I'm still going to see it because I don't feel like I personally could talk about it unless I've seen it. But I'm hoping that this is one of those situations where maybe the critics don't get it and the fans love it. But it's going to have a hard time. I mean, Shazam is doing really, really well. And you've got, right after that, you've got Pet Sematary that's doing, it's second place, but it's also doing really well. Of course, when we were talking about Captain Marvel, I mentioned, you've got Hellboy coming up right after it, that might
knock it off,
knock Shazam out of there. But apparently that's not going to be the case because Shazam is doing extremely well. Another movie I've yet to see, but I've been hearing some really, really good things about it. And with its second week, it just might be too well established and too strong, and especially with the reviews that Hellboy is getting, this might not do well.
That's upsetting.
I'm a big fan of the Hellboy films. Guillermo del Toro, of course, he did amazing things with that character. I know this is a new production, but the thing about it, too, is that New Line really needs this film to do well because they've been having issues. And if it doesn't, that's going to be a real blow to the company. But I guess we'll just have to see what happens this weekend, and we'll take it from there. Well, let's go back to some good news, especially for Dave Harbour. Even if Hellboy doesn't do well, the next movie that he's shooting is probably going to do really well, because I saw news that he's going to be in the new Black Widow movie. So
he's going to have a couple of comic book movies under him. Nice.
Yeah. So Black Widow starts shooting in June.
Okay.
And it's going to be a bit of a departure for the Marvel Cinematic Universe because it's supposed to be R-rated. Yeah. Which, when you look at Black Widow's history, I can see that. So that's going to be a real step off the cliff for them because they're not used to that kind of thing. Of course, with them bringing Fox on, with the merger, well, with all the success that Fox has had with their R-rated films, it looks like something that Disney's willing to embrace. In fact, on Disney's page, they've got a picture of Deadpool on their front page. So they're not ashamed of the R-rated films that apparently they're going to be
they've inherited
that they're going to be willing to support. And I think Black Widow is going to be their ability to kind of step into that world, and I think that they're going to be able to do really well with it. Honestly, I saw that they've got an interesting director, Kate Shortland. She directed a film a few years ago called Lore, and that's about it that I can think of. Interesting film, definitely. And so bringing her in, of course, that's the thing about Disney. They're kingmakers and queenmakers when it comes to directors. They have a really good talent. Kevin Feige just has this ability to spot talent. So I suspect that she's going to be able to do a really good job with this film. I'm going to be really interested to see what she does with it. And so we're probably going to be seeing Black Widow next year. And to start up Phase 4, because, of course, with the Endgame, that's going to be about the end of Phase 3. That's going to be their cutoff. And let me kind of step off a little bit to talk about Endgame for a little bit, because we're about to see that really soon. One thing that was interesting, of course, is, of course, we're going to have Captain Marvel in this film. And I didn't realize this, but apparently Brie Larson filmed Endgame before she filmed Captain Marvel.
Oh, really? Huh.
So some people who have seen the film, they said, you can kind of tell a little bit she's still trying to figure out who that character is. And she spends Endgame figuring out how to play the character that she ultimately played in Captain Marvel.
Okay.
I guess we'll see that when we see it. But she kind of developed the character in Endgame, and we're going to see that in that film. We'll see that development. We just got like a couple of weeks, so we're
very close.
Yeah, I've got a lot of films to catch up on before then, though, for sure. I mean, I still haven't seen Shazam yet. I haven't seen Us yet,
or Pet Sematary. I haven't seen any of these.
I haven't seen any of those yet, and because I was, of course, dealing with other things. But
me too. It's been a busy couple weekends.
Yes.
My nibblings prom was last weekend, so I had all
I
that
saw
to deal with. Yeah.
Yes, I saw that. So we definitely got some catch up to do, and hopefully we can get our plates cleared, because certainly when Endgame arrives, I mean, we're going to be ready for that. I did see Kevin Feige said no intermission.
Okay.
I guess he's worried about it breaking the momentum of the film.
So wear adult diapers or don't drink anything.
Yeah, or bring your plastic urinal. I actually saw somebody on Facebook did a Photoshop of one of those plastic urinals with the Endgame logo on it.
They should sell those up front.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
So go to the bathroom first, folks. Definitely.
It's like a road trip.
Yeah, let's talk DC for just a little bit. Of course, we got James Gunn, who's doing Suicide Squad 2, and then of course he goes back to Marvel. Strange, but of course come to think of it, I don't know if we ever on the podcast mentioned that Disney hired him back, but yeah, they did.
Yeah, they did.
Just in case you guys didn't know, or you were sitting there wondering,
surprise.
or you were wondering why the heck didn't Brian bring that up?
Talk about it.
Yeah, but yeah, they're bringing him back, and he'll start working on that after he's done with Suicide Squad 2. But some weird news came out is that they're cutting Deadshot out of the movie. They're not going to have Deadshot anymore. But they're not getting rid of Idris Elba, though.
Do you think maybe that was their plan all along, and it just got a rumor that he was going to be Deadshot?
No, because they said they were hiring him as Deadshot. Okay. So apparently they've decided to rework it in some way, and he's going to be playing some other character. I'm not sure who. They haven't mentioned it. But yeah, I mean, if you got Idris Elba on contract, you don't let him go. I mean, even you have him doing something in your film. Of course, at this point, we don't know what that is, but this strange movie is getting stranger as we go along. Yeah. So I guess once we know, of course, we'll let all the Geek Watchers out there know.
And speaking of like DC to Marvel, we've had a couple like Ben Affleck or Marvel to DC, Michael Keaton, and now we see that Michelle Pfeiffer is interested in playing Catwoman again.
Yeah, I saw that.
I'm completely happy with that. I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Oh yeah, I would love to see her step into that again. So
see, Eartha Kitt was always my favorite Catwoman. She didn't get it very long, but Michelle Pfeiffer's right up there. She was amazing.
Oh yeah, I'd love to see what she would do with that role again.
Maybe she got the bug again after she did Ant-Man and the Wasp. So maybe she's like, maybe comic book movies is where it's at. I'm going to get back in there.
There you go. And yeah, I mean, let's face it, her portrayal of Catwoman was iconic.
Iconic,
absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, she held her own with some heavyweights in that film. I mean, you got Danny DeVito, you had Christopher Walken. It was a pretty solid cast. And again, she was one of the best things about that film, certainly. So, well, let's end up. We've got a couple of episodes of The Walking Dead, the last 2 episodes. So we can start out with episode 15, The Calm Before.
Calm Before.
That was not fun to watch.
It wasn't easy. And I guess now, it's been a couple weeks, so I've managed to get over the shock of it.
Yeah.
And, like you've been reminding me that it's going to be like the Red Wedding right up until it. And then, when it does happen, it's just, it is just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of a spoiler for the comic, of course. In the comic book, when they had the Pikes, there were 13 people on the Pikes. And 2 of the people that were on the Pikes in the comics, Rosita was one of them, and King Ezekiel was one of the other ones. And I was wondering if they were going to do that in the TV show. Now, the thing about it is they didn't, obviously. And I think that's a great move. Because we've talked about the cast now. It's kind of thinned out a little bit. And to be honest, I don't think they could really have afforded to get rid of Rosita or King Ezekiel. And I'm glad they didn't.
Right.
And felt like they needed to be a little... I mean, what happened was enough of a shock as it was. Because I think there's only 10 people. Right. But again, you need to have those characters in there, I think, and sparing them in this situation, I think, work.
They're some of the most human storylines in, our world, where it has become just us versus them battle, but then we still have these love triangles and the baby mama drama kind of stuff. We still have those, and it's important to show that they're still human.
Right.
That they still have, they still have the same struggles as we do, even in this, harsh world.
Oh, yeah. But let's talk a little bit about the 10 that did wind up making the Vlad Dracul Hall of Fame.
See, I was thinking Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, Lord of the Flies. They started out by showing us Ozzy and Alec, which were the highwaymen, the lead highwayman and the second in command. They didn't kill any of the other highwaymen off. No. I thought there was going to be some real slaughter involved there.
Yeah, and it's disappointing because I really liked the highwaymen. They were fun.
Well, we may see some more of them, but yeah, Ozzy especially, I really enjoyed him, and I was afraid. I was afraid when I saw the highwaymen. I think we talked about this before, that they were going to be the red shirts, but it surprised me they didn't kill all of them. I thought there was going to be that scene, but it turned out that they were a little bit more sneaky. It wasn't a full frontal assault. They kind of sneaked
Guerrilla.
in. Yeah, and I mean, especially with Alpha, basically killing that woman and cutting and basically scalping her so he could wear it as a wig. That was extremely disturbing. But of course, we also, on the pike, we had DJ, which some people may not remember him. He was one of the saviors. There was one episode, I'm trying to remember what the name of the episode was, where Maggie was bringing food to the saviors, paying their tribute, and he takes one of the tomatoes out and eats it. That was DJ, and he was on the pike. And then Frankie, the redhead, was one of Negan's wives. She and I'm trying to remember who the other one was. They were the ones that
they wanted Eugene to make the
pill. Yeah.
Yes.
And she was out of there. She only showed up like DJ. You'd see him on occasion in the background, at Hilltop. And we of course hadn't seen Frankie in forever. Of course, you notice her when Henry asked her, if she'd seen seen Lydia. That'd been the first time I'd seen her in forever, and I'm like, oh, that's not good. Because if they're just bringing her back in, she may have been in the background in a few places, but I didn't notice. But then we start getting to some people that they've been developing over the last season. Of course, Tammy Rose, who was played by Brett Butler. Yeah. I had a feeling she was going to be one of them, and and that's a shame. Yeah. What a great character.
Yeah, man, and she had no problem. She took that baby, and she said, "I'm going to take care of this baby." Yeah, and again, looking in the future and ripping families apart. It's whew.
Yeah. Well, she literally too good for this world, I guess. And then, of course, we wind up seeing Rodney and Addie, two of the three trouble children of Hilltop. I had a feeling that they might wind up costing them. Of course, the leader of that pack wound up unscathed, but Addie especially, because she was an interesting character. They hadn't really started to develop yet. I kind of wanted to see maybe something happen with, maybe it's sort of like a triangle with her and Henry and Lydia. Of course, that's not going to happen. Nope. Enid, that was a bit of a shock for me. Yeah. I suspected that it was either going to be her or her boyfriend. Or for Aiden, it was going to be either her or Aiden. I thought it was going to be Aiden. I really did. But no, they decided to go for the jugular on that one. And yeah, the Enid, that was a real shock. Tara
was the biggest shock for me. I could not believe it.
That I wasn't expecting, and from what I understand, it was something that not a lot of people on the show was expecting. This was one of those shock calls. It's like, you get the call, yeah, we're going to kill you this season, and that happened. Now, of course, that was the biggest shock for me was the last one, and they really played it off for people who read the comics. They really wanted you to think it was going to be King Ezekiel. And I thought it was going to be King Ezekiel. And then when they cut to it, you see it's Henry. And I did not expect that at all. If for no other reason is that Henry was and we talked about this before, Henry was going to be
the new Carl.
Yeah,
and take over his storylines.
Exactly, from the comics. And they got rid of him. So now we don't have a Carl. And so all that storyline's kind of gone out the window. And I don't think they should have done King Ezekiel. I think they definitely need him in the show. And keeping him around, I think, is going to help the show in the long run. But Henry up there, I did not expect to see that at all. But that was certainly a gut punch to Carol, obviously. Yep. It's like, it's not...
Yeah, all the memes of, showing her, look at the flowers, Lizzie, and Sophia coming out of the barn, and now, Henry's head on a pike, and it's just...
Yeah, I mean, Carol's not good for kids, I think. But, of course, that was going to be the setup for the next episode, but... There was so much friendliness and togetherness and lots of good feelings in this, and then they end it with that. And of course, that one scene with Alpha and Daryl, which in the comics, of course, that was Rick, not Daryl, but Daryl's kind of taken over in that. But basically seeing how deep Alpha's bench runs, that was horrendous. It's like thousands upon thousands of walkers at their beck and call that they can just send as an army. And, the thing about it is, eventually they're going to pull the trigger on this one. And what are our friends going to do about that? I don't know. I don't know if they're going to go the comics route. I don't want to really spoil the comics or even do a spoiler for the show if this is the route they go. But they obviously have not heard the last of the Whisperers.
Right.
Even though they've sort of have this truce that's going on right now, I don't see it lasting.
Nope.
So, but let's go ahead and talk a little bit about episode 16 then, The Storm. Which was our introduction to snow. And apparently one of the worst storms that they've had. This wasn't just a bad snowstorm. This was a horrendous snowstorm. And with everything else that our heroes have had to deal with, of course, the pipes breaking, which, was heartbreaking, obviously, because they'd sent Henry to the hilltop to learn smithing to help fix those pipes. That was...
Yeah. The kingdom is a character itself.
Yeah.
And it took the hardest blow.
Yeah, it certainly did.
That in the fact that even the structures could not hold their home anymore.
Right.
That it's like this inanimate place just gave up, just like the people did.
Yeah.
It's like we're done. Our family has been hurt beyond belief.
Yeah.
And we're done.
And especially since that was where the fair was. And so...
The kingdom committed suicide.
Yeah, in a real sense. And, of course, now they're at Hilltop. And, they may wind up going back in the spring and try to fix things. We don't know. But, of course, you had this horrible snowstorm coming. They've got to get out of there. They've got to make it to Hilltop. So there's that time element. And they're trying to make it to Hilltop. And, of course, Rick's bridge is not there. So it's going to take them longer. They hole up in the sanctuary for a little bit. Of course, they figure out that because they don't have enough food, they're going to have to violate the truce and do the shortcut through Whisperer territory. They're very fortunate because the Whisperers didn't stick around. They went south for the winter. They
migrated.
They migrated, which was a smart thing to do.
And it's what they said. That's what the Whisperers have said. We're animals now. Yeah. And we're a pack. And we have alphas and betas, and like I said, we're the pack now. We're animals.
Right. So. They definitely did the smart thing, and that really helped our friends out in the kingdom because obviously they didn't need to have to deal with that kind of crap. So they might manage to get away with it, but of course there were problems. Lydia desperately wanted to die, tried to kill herself more than once, tried to get Carol to kill her once. And I mean, that survivor guilt was definitely strong with her. I mean, definitely something she's going to have to, at this point, learn to live with.
But that's kind of like also where we get to see that we know Carol's still there. She's a broken woman, but she's still Carol who burns shit. Yeah. And she'll be able to go on and this is a time where something didn't need burned. This is a time where something needed built. Yeah. And she just, pretty much laid it out. Kid, get your shit together.
Yeah.
And let's go.
Yeah. Well, the real shame of it, of course, is that at least for now, her and Ezekiel are no longer together. I think Carol just basically needs this time to figure out where to go. You know, what's next for her. I like that coupling, and I hope that we're not seeing the last of it. But I guess, of course, that's going to be season 10 to explain. Now, the one thing, of course, about episode 16 and Alexandria is, of course, we had Judith running off to save Dog. Mm-hmm. And Negan steps up to the plate and saves her. Yep. Which, I have to say, I'm not going to say that surprised me.
No, it's not surprising.
I do have to say this as a writer. Sometimes I ship people for writer reasons, not necessarily because I think they're good for each other. I always say that anything that you put into a story should be something that helps advance the narrative and can help create conflict, because conflict is the engine that drives story. And so as the writer side of this, not saying that this is necessarily something that I would want to have happen because I think this would just be cool. I just think it would drive a lot of stuff in the story. But I have to admit that for a little while I've been shipping Negan and Michonne.
Nichonne? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
What's their ship name?
Negon, maybe? Nichonne, I think sounds better. I don't know. And not because I think the two should be together necessarily, or I think that the fans are just asking for it, but specifically because obviously the conflict and the trouble, especially if Maggie were to come back, of how much narrative that story would drive. Now, of course,
it's kind of Richard III there.
Yeah.
Because Richard III immediately marries the woman that he killed her wife. So that's kind of... Yeah. Yeah.
The thing about it is I thought that, if that was something like that was going to happen, Judith was going to be the pathway to it, is that Negan would do this daring rescue. That would be sort of the lead in for maybe the two of them starting to get together. Now, obviously that's not going to happen with the fact that Denai Guerra is getting ready to leave the show. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking part of what they're developing here is somebody's going to have to be watching Judith if she's gone. If they're not if Michonne's not taking Judith with her, if she's leaving for whatever reason, Judith needs somebody to watch for, to take care of her, and that may be Negan.
And, well, also, Alexandria's going to need a leader, and they know that Negan can do it. I mean, they hate his guts. He's sitting in there, laughing at Gabriel and Rosita and, and just making everyone miserable. But they know that he's good at what he does, and they know that he can be ruthless like Alpha.
Yeah.
So, really, I mean, if Negan plus Carol up against Alpha, I'm going to go with Negan and Carol every time.
Yeah.
So, that's what they're going to need to go up against this threat.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely see season 10, what's going to happen there. From what I understand, Michonne's not going to play a huge role in season 10. They're going to kind of put her in the background a little bit until it's time to get rid of her. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping they don't kill her off, but from what I've been hearing, she's going to be showing up in the Rick Grimes movies.
Excellent. So the helicopter's going to come get her, Rick Jr., and take him off. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe RJ. Mm-hmm. Or, again, he might be staying behind along with Judith, and Negan takes care of both of them. Mm-hmm. That's possible. But, again, we got a long wait till October.
Yep.
Because it's October 2nd, I think, is going to be the start of season 10. And, oh boy. They're definitely going to have a lot to build on this, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. But of course, in October we'll be talking about it when we definitely see it. And so, with that, we come to the end of episode 62 of the Geek Watch podcast. Thank you for listening, and tune in next week for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.